Okay. Here it is. We're on. We're back. How are you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good. Excited. It's good. It's been a good week. Looks like we're gonna have a good weekend. Looks like next week's gonna be fun. So I'm happy. I'm glad. I'm glad you were able to make it for this week. This one I was thinking of you when I saw this on the docket. I was thinking Jake might like this one.
Well, thanks.
Or at least
do
definitely
like
have something really fun to say. I know that because well, I mean, you're back again, and this is like your fourth time here, not including your second thoughts. So I'm so happy. Like we're starting to get into the denser multi-number return guest hosts here.
Yeah, it's fun. It makes it a little easier and more of a rhythm going. I enjoy it. I
Yeah,
enjoyed seeing the other hosts as well.
yeah, and I'm looking forward to this. The show's doing better than I expected, considering how niche it is, and yeah, it's the growth is nice and steady, and I'm liking the fact that 34 episodes in, haven't missed a Saturday yet. Doesn't look like we're gonna be missing one anytime soon so far, which is ideal, and already a few scripts that we've covered have been announced that they're going into production. Some self-produced, some produced by studios like Lionsgate and whatnot. And yeah, we got another one that doesn't have that pedigree yet, but there's definitely something to discuss about it, right?
Yeah, there's definitely discussion.
Yeah.
This one can be discussed.
And just a reminder to everyone listening as well, like if you have the opportunity to read the script, either by reaching out to me or by Google search, or if it's just something that you're normally familiar with, please leave some comments in the chat, or if you're also a Patreon member, leave comments on the post to get those discussion points, because we will recap them on the show on the following week. Or if you are a Patreon, because I do post what script we'll be reading on the Monday for the following Saturday, you can leave your comments there, and we will also read them out here on the show after our initial coverage of the screenplay. So feel free to participate in that. We always like, whatever interactions we get from the audience is always a blessing and something we really appreciate. So please let us know those thoughts so we can include them into our overall coverage and get a better sense from you, the audience, what it is that you like about what these writers are doing, pitching out, essentially original content. That's not the big tent pole, not the remakes, not the IPs, not the adaptations of the famous book series, all that type of stuff. We want that feedback from you, because this helps us figure out, and also conveys to the Hollywood industry that, yeah, there's a desire for movies that are movies again, right?
Yes, it definitely. That just, if not for reading them and knowing that there's original stories people are working on, makes you feel like, oh, okay, there is some creativity and originality.
Yes,
That
it's
and I think they're the funnest to discuss too, because in some ways you already know the story.
in some ways, yeah. Like you figure out certain mechanics and familiarities, but it's almost to the point where I just kind of want to show that, there are players in Hollywood that's suppressing originality because they're afraid of it, and it's like, let's at least run it through the ringer here and prove that there's a lot less to fear than what they expect. Prove their data points wrong, the manipulated data points wrong, right?
Yeah.
So that's.
And have you had anybody reach out to you in the industry, and but on the perspectives that you've had, or is it still just new enough that?
Well, it's new enough that I haven't had anyone reach out to me directly with regards to the show. I've had some professionals reach out to me in general, just for the normal stuff I do on social media and on YouTube. But nothing yet on the show, aside from the fact that there is someone out there who I don't know who it is, but I wish it were me, but I never didn't think to do that. But they made an IMDb for the show, and every writer that we talk about, they list on there. So when it gets updated, week by week, sometimes the writers we discuss have a credit being quote unquote featured on the show. So if those writers take a look at their IMDb and they're wondering what the heck is the scripts on Saturdays, a Google search will direct them to the channel and to us covering their script, again, without spoilers, which actually makes it a lot easier for us to not burn any bridges or burn any toes, so to speak. And they can see from the live chat recording, which YouTube should be maintaining, and if they don't, that's a pain in the butt to try and fix. But also in the comments to see how people are responding to their work and how we are responding to it, because we've given some really great advice for a lot of things that were like just under the cusp of really great, but not quite there, and then also ridiculed the things that were pretty bad.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of things that I went, oh, I didn't see it that way. I like that though, And there's been a couple of scripts that I was on the fence or didn't like, and hearing a couple people discuss it like this, I'm going, wow, maybe I didn't pay attention to it as much because it wasn't a week I was taking any notes. I was just reading it to be caught up, and it's just good to hear a couple people talk about it. You get the excitement and the interest. It piques something.
Yeah,
and it's fun.
It's I mean, I one of the things I like about it, and the compliments that I do receive from a bunch of people, is that it's a very unique show that we have on the YouTube sphere, especially in this pocket of the YouTube world. And I'm like, yeah, I think that's nice. It's refreshing. It's different. We get to see how the sausage is made, at least one step of it.
Yeah.
And it's not as gruesome as you'd expect. so there's that going for us. So yeah, and I'm just glad to have you here, Jake, for us. So let's get into the proper intro. I keep on teasing. I do have a song, but I have to get professionals to sing it because it was made, like, I wrote the lyrics. Another co-host, TJ Mack of Mac Media, he helped early on in the foundations of that, so I wanted to pay my respects to him because he'll be coming back on the show soon. I've got the song. I just have to get some musicians to play it and a singer to sing it, and then we'll be throwing it in for our intro, and then probably do a stinger for the next part, so that we can really up the production value of this little grassroots thing I'm doing here with you guys.
Well, I look forward to that.
Yes, I hope it'll be great, and if it sucks, at least it's on the perfect show to talk about why it sucks.
You should get critique if there is critique to be made.
Absolutely, that's why I love it over here. So, with that being said, welcome to Scripts on Saturdays, the only screenplay review show on the interwebs, discussing scripts both professional and amateur, circulating around Hollywood, giving you, the TV and movie-going audience, a behind-the-scenes and inside track on what writers are pushing and what producers are buying. I am your host, the Script Doctor, and joining me this week is Jake of 52 Movies a Year. So happy to have you back, sir. We always have an interesting one.
Yeah.
But this one's got something a little extra to it.
It kind of does.
It kind of does. So the script that we'll be reviewing this week, as you can see from the thumbnail, is called A Runner. It was placed 24th on last year's Blacklist. That's Blacklist of 2023. It's written by Tommy White and Miles Hubley, and it placed 24th with only 13 votes. So again, we're in that really close, tight, voting spread of between 10 and 15, and they're all in between 20 and 40, in their placeage. So that's what we have here. So that maybe will give us the quality or not. This is a top 25 script according to the producers that voted on the screenplays for last year. Jake, please share with us the log line for Runner.
Okay. High-end courier Hank Malone has 3 hours to transport a liver from LAX to a Santa Barbara hospital for immediate transplant surgery. The recipient, a dying 7-year-old girl with the rarest blood type on the planet. If only the head of Southland's most dangerous crime syndicate didn't need the organ too.
That's right. And the synopsis is as follows. Hank Malone, a stoic and formidable former Navy SEAL now navigating the challenges of recovery, finds himself entrenched in a new line of work as a runner, a man who takes on various tasks provided the price is right. Today, his assignment comes with an unsettling twist. He must accompany Ben Bishop, an overly garrulous and an extroverted medical courier tasked with delivering a liver to a critically ill young girl before the clock strikes 10 p.m. However, the situation escalates dangerously when it is revealed that the liver is also coveted by the ruthless head of the Gallo crime family, who needs the organ to sustain her illicit empire. To secure it, she dispatches her drug-addled son, Damien, on a bloody rampage across the Southlands. As the body count rises, the question looms, can Hank outpace Damien's trail of carnage and save the life of an innocent girl? So that is the basic setup for Runner.
And that was the synopsis, not the entire script. But
no,
it was close.
But it does have that nice little cliffhanger at the end. Getting some of the the key players involved. One of the things I did appreciate about the script is that it does have a low character count. Makes it easier to read. But this premise stuck out to me because I read a premise very much like this in the 90s, but it was written actually in the 80s by a comic book writer named Mike Barron. And this was one of his first Flash stories where the Flash is Wally West, and his mission was to deliver a heart transplant across the country. And there was a particular Vandal Savage was going to stop him from doing that because he had other goals in mind. And I was like, that is a really... I mean, that was a really good, short story in the comic book. It was later adapted as a cartoon in I think the first season of Young Justice or something of that nature. It was a DC cartoon back when DC was making good cartoons. And I'm like, that's a good story and stuff. And I just kind of left it there. And then all of a sudden I see these two guys, Tommy White and Miles Hubley, with the same premise essentially. Except instead of a heart, it's a liver. And similar to the cartoon adaptation, it's also a little girl that's the recipient. And where in the comic, I think it's an older lady that's the recipient. But here, this one has a little bit of a twist. Is that the antagonist needs the liver organ for themselves, as opposed to just trying to have this little girl die, or the recipient die for higher plot purposes. So that was kind of, I was wondering, like, how similar is the execution of this script going to be to that old story that Mike Barron did? And I have to say, I'm happy that it strayed as much as it could away from that, because otherwise, you get into some very, very sketchy copyright and plagiarism areas. So that was my take when I saw the log line and was starting reading the script. What was your initial take, Jake, when you opened this puppy up?
Yeah, you know what? My initial take was it felt like reminiscent of 80s and 90s action movies. Mm-hmm. I could see the older action where you just go to see an action movie just for the action of it, and that. I like that. I like that idea. I didn't know the story from the comic book or anything like that, but it also kind of started to remind me of I knew that there was some other ones where there was a transporter and there's people who do these type of. I like the term runner, but they have different transport and other people are fixers and just doing odd jobs. But it initially piqued my interest.
Yeah. And so. Let's talk a little bit about that. Like the opening is, of course, a very a TV style opening, in my opinion. It's we're in the emergency room. There's a person being treated for, like, in a car accident or some sort of severely lacerated. Excuse me, they're losing blood. Doctors and nurses are doing what they can to save the patient, and then they patient sadly passes away, and they see on their license there's that little indicator that they're an organ donor. And then that takes us over to our introduction of Hank. And what did you think about how Hank was introduced, Jake?
I liked it. I liked the description of him. From the description, I thought, Alan Richardson.
Yeah.
And if I was going back to the 80s, I would have thought, they made this for Arnold Schwarzenegger, or, somebody who's huge. But so, maybe because I had just recently watched Reacher, this is that's who I pictured. In my mind, that's what I'm picturing Alan Richardson doing all these things. And they kind of had him as stoic. So I was, he was almost morphing into Reacher. And not because of the script, but that's, in my own mind.
Yeah, he wasn't very talkative because he's described as like, tree big, huge.
Tree big, yeah.
Arms inked, he's edgy, inscrutable. But he's also got a little bit of tenderness to him.
Yeah, he's learning to cook, he's learning French, he's skilled, but he's obviously alone.
Mm-hmm.
At least in this scene.
Yeah, like he's making himself a giant plate of like French toast while he's using an iPhone app to help him learn how to speak French. And it's just it contrasts the appearance that we're shown of this character. And he's having like these very silly phrases he's learning, like, now you're going to say the cat eats pizza on the bus. And he's like, le chat mange la pizza dans le bus. And you're like, oh, okay, that'd be funny for a big guy, a big intimidating guy like this. And, we get these quick shots of him. He's making breakfast. He gets a call, from his handler who's like, well, we got some gigs. He's like, not until I finish eating. And he's got an appointment. What's his appointment? Well, he has to go to a school gym where he's basically just doing an AA meeting, We don't get any of the details of that. It's just kind of like an in and out type of thing, because it's not enough about what he's saying at the meeting. It's the fact that he's the type of guy that goes there and he gets his 1 year chip, and that's signifying of the day. And then he gets back to work where his handler Iggy has a list of tasks that he has to do, such as like a senator who partied way too hard last night has to be discreetly moved from the hotel back to his home where his wife is very upset with him being out so late.
Yeah. I liked that. I liked how, his interaction with his boss wanted to get to work early. He's like, no, you could tell he was a routine guy.
Right.
And then, dog tags. And so you get that right off the bat. Then you get to see these opening of, do this, and they work through the senator, and then he gets a montage of, runner type jobs. He's got to transport some cash.
Yeah, he transports some cash. He picks up a bird from a film director that lost it in the divorce, and the address to deliver the bird is literally across the street. And he's just like, that's ridiculous.
I liked those little comedic things. I thought they were because I like they kind of were well timed. Like, all right, well, I've accepted the fact that he does anything and anyone, and his boss is kind of a jerk and all that stuff. I bought into everything, but it's kind of the world around him slightly absurd, but he's stoic and in the middle and stays the same. But just I could picture, oh, I got to go across the street. And only a producer would have two high-end homes,
Yeah, well, it's not just that. It's just, you definitely see some sort of like, tweaked out director would definitely be the type that would live across the street from his ex-wife after a recent divorce. And instead of just walking the thing over, he would hire a third party to go and do that because he so much hates his wife. He doesn't even want to hear her, let alone,
and
walk
the bird
across the street.
Is not even anything particular, but it's illegal,
Yeah, it's a monk parakeet, which I did not know were illegal.
I didn't either. I had to look it up, and apparently they're a nuisance.
Mm-hmm.
Not particularly pretty, so I was like, I wonder why they added that, other than maybe they knew somebody who wanted a monk, but or it was just some wiry, weird producer quirk, I want something nobody can have.
Right.
Or should have.
And at the same time, I'm reading that scene, and then I see, okay, he has the monk parakeet with him because the wife doesn't want it, so he's got it. So he's just driving around with it for a time, and I'm like, this has too much attention to it to make it feel like it's just a gag. That like it feels to me like you're kind of setting this up that this bird is going to come back into play, but spoiler, like the only spoiler, it doesn't. It's really just a gag that kind of runs its course a little bit too long, in my opinion. And it kind of eats up some valuable real estate where it really should have just been a one-off where he walked across the street, she says she doesn't want the bird, and then cut to him just dropping it off at the animal shelter. Like, I don't know what to do. You take care of this. It's bye. And that's it.
Release it into the wild.
Yeah. But like we kind of interrupt it a little bit because we hear from Monica through the phone, which is Hank's ex-wife. So we're playing into that trope again. We have this big brooding guy who's divorced, and yeah, she checks in on him and congratulating him for his 1-year chip, and then you find out she's got a newborn baby and it's keeping her up at night. Yeah, he's trying to be polite and strong for her. Definitely tell there's still feelings there.
Yeah, you could tell he had feelings.
But that's just kind of like, this is just a character moment, and I thought it was like a sweet one. It kind of works what it is, considering the fact that we don't get to see Monica, we just hear her voice and how Hank responds to there. So that was interesting because I felt like it kind of gave us a little bit of extra depth, and it didn't feel like it was drawn on because it was like only a page long, like the exchange. Then it gets straight into Iggy, telling him this is the new gig. Get your butt in gear. But I want to know, like, how did you feel like the introduction to Monica and how Hank and her were interacting? What was going through your mind there?
Like I said, I guess I have to preface it. I keep thinking of an '80s action show, and
Mm-hmm.
In the '80s, either the action hero always got his wife back, or she was a horrible person and he was better off, and that just helped him find the new love interest. But I like this. I mean, it was because it showed his character, and so if that was all she was in on the she was just character development for him.
Mm-hmm.
Let us know where he is. Maybe there might be a little bit of backstory. I wanted to see more, and I was like, okay, it didn't need to be drawn out then. Maybe she'll come back. I thought it was great. First 10 pages, I thought smooth.
Yeah. I aside from the parakeet thing going a little bit longer than expected, I thought it was pretty smooth because right after we get to we get to the premise right off the bat. As soon as he does those basic tasks, Iggy calls him up. He says, "Hey, we got a highly sensitive medical package. Supposed to go to Santa Barbara, but there's a storm coming in. The plane was diverted to LAX. You got to pick it up at 6, and you got to be there, by 9. And it's where he is. He's like it's an hour and a half away. Rain is starting to come in. Rain in California. The locals there don't know how to deal with it. So that it comes rarely, but it when it does hit, they're very lost. It's like they've never seen an umbrella before or driven during a thunderstorm before, which is hysterical for me. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, not only that, like the rain also kind of cleans up a little bit of the roads too, because sometimes you have cars driving, they leak a little bit of oil there and it gets hot, and if the right materials to strike that spot, boom, something bursts into flames.
Yes.
But in a more versatile climate, that stuff gets diluted with the water over a couple of days of either changing of weather, actual rain, whatnot. In California, it could happen. That accident could happen. A little bit of oil spilling on the road could happen in May and not get washed away till October. So you got a long stretch of time. With that. But once we get the idea, okay, there's a medical package that Hank is being hired to run from point A to point B, in this case LAX to Santa Barbara, and we cut to Santa Barbara actually, and we meet Kate Baker, who is this woman in her 30s, and she's hovering helicopter-like mom over her 7-year-old daughter Ellie, and they're playing a game of 20 questions. And I thought this was kind of a cute and endearing scene.
Yeah. Especially where it kind of dips back to it.
Hmm.
But I won't go into that because that's down the road. But I like that. I could buy this. Perfectly set up. These are all the characters, and this is where they are, and we're ready to start.
And
Um,
and their character introductions are strong enough that you don't forget their voice or their names. Like that's one thing. There's something very distinct. And so I have to give props to the writing team on being able to nail that. That's a hard thing for a lot of writers to do, is to make the characters' introduction stand out and at the same time give them some dialogue enough to the point where you're like, you're always going to remember them as you come back to them, even if you go visit some other characters in the story.
yeah, and I agree with you. I didn't know if it was just that they had simple names and they were easy to remember. The only character I thought had a well, I mean, I'm not going to say it was weak, but I wasn't 100% clear on was the doctor.
Oh, Dr.
Because
Ainsley. Yeah, yeah.
is Dr. Ainsley a man or a woman? Let's
Yeah, I have
find
no
out
idea.
later.
I think,
But
yeah.
not that that mattered. But that would have been that I remember reading that going, did I miss? Is this you know, because she says put a hand on her shoulder, but she puts it on Kate's, suddenly a hand on her shoulder. That's Kate. So I'm like,
Yep.
okay, doctor it could be a man or a woman, but it didn't matter. It didn't slow anything down.
Exactly. And you know, in those cases here, like this, like Dr. Ainsley's not a main character, they're a supporting character. It's not their gender doesn't matter as much as how they are played on the chessboard in this game.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. Whereas everything else, the other characters we met, the gender is kind of very much matters because you got a mom taking care of her daughter. So you got that relationship. You've got a big brooding guy whose whole goal is being intimidating enough so that he can move sensitive material throughout the LA, California area without anyone wanting to mess with him. So I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Not really going to be able to pull it off with even a badass looking woman is going to still get some more flack than this guy would. So
yeah,
you understand those roles.
And Iggy even pointed that out. We don't meet Iggy, but we know that, or we don't see Iggy, but he's like, you're my best employee, but you're my biggest pain in the butt. He challenges. You see a lot of the pushback from, Iggy seems impatient, and Hank is just, nope, I'll get there. But he also said, you're my best runner because you're big and nobody messes with you.
Yeah, people are more afraid of what you might do, not knowing that you're probably not going to do anything. Because I think even one of his gigs was, hey, I need you to go to this guy who's using ransomware to exploit this kid, and just talk to him. He's like, I don't beat up people. He's like, no, I don't want you to beat up. I want you to talk with him. And then what's the scene? He knocks on the door. The guy opens it. He's like, I don't have to explain this, do I? He's like, I guess not. So you want not to see me again? I don't. Okay, then don't stop what you're doing, and you won't see me again. Okay, and then that's the scene. And I'm like, that's clever.
Like it made me think of Deadpool's, not by comparison, but it made me think of it. The only other thing I'd seen that in was he was friends with the guy up until he said, he became intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
All he was intimidating right off the bat.
Yeah.
That just show up. Your size will do enough.
Yeah, exactly. And so from there, what we get is we get our introduction to our next character. So we're getting all these character introductions, and yet they're very, like, this is one thing I try to tell a lot of my clients and a lot of people that reach out to me is like, when you're writing a screenplay, don't try and introduce a dozen characters in one scene. Try and give the main characters that you really want to focus on, give them their own scene with a supporting character that allows us to really get to know who these people are. Because we got a nice little montage of stuff with Ben. We get that one great scene with Kate and her daughter Ellie with a little bit of a tag with Dr. Ainsley. Then we come back to Hank again to follow up with what he's doing as a nice little breaker to remind us of who he is, what he does. And then now we get introduced to Ben, who is a 60-year-old guy. He's been doing this for a long time, flies economy, and he's a talker, like a very chatty guy. And he doesn't tell us that he's a chatty guy. He shows us he's a chatty guy.
Yeah. And is it's very fatherly. He's giving advice.
Yeah, he's like
guy on the plane.
He's like John Candy in Planes, Trains, Automobiles, right? Like he's that type, but he's not he's not annoying as in the way he does it. Like there's something very empathetic about him.
You know
And
who I see
who did you see?
playing that? Uh, oh, oh my gosh. Breaking Bad. What's his name?
Bryan Cranston?
Bryan Cranston. I blanked on his name while I was thinking it.
That's
A
okay.
serious Bryan Cranston, because he comes across as a father.
Right.
You know? But for whatever reason, that's who I saw. Because I could see him he's the guy who talks, even if nobody's listening, but people tend to listen.
Right. Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, like, when he's talking to this stranger that he's been sitting next to on the airplane, he's just talking about, like, his wife and, how, she passed away, but she would have this advice, and he would convey it on to the young man. He's talking about, like, what love is and how real it is and how it takes work, and if you truly love this woman, you got to prioritize it and don't be a schmuck about it. I'm like, that's cool. Like, that's a guy there's a lot conveyed in that little monologue and that brief conversation. That's barely a page. And you're just like, I like this guy. He's cool.
Yeah, you got everything you needed to know so quickly.
Exactly. And then, we also get this one understanding moment where the plane, it's taxiing to the gate, and everybody's about to get up, but the plane, the captain says, everybody please remain seated. We have a priority passenger that must disembark first. And Ben basically says, thank you to everybody. A little girl and her mother sincerely thank you. And he holds up this medical briefcase that's, got the cooling systems in there to keep the liver preserved. And he doesn't waste any time. He gets the heck off that plane. Like, he's not a jerk about it, which, again, also makes you really like Ben. Because you always have that one person, if you've ever been traveling, where it's like, yep, you're not getting off until this person gets off. And then that person decides to take their sweet time as if the world has stopped for them. It's like, you're disrespectful to everybody on this plane.
I have actually experienced that.
Me too, a few times.
Exactly. You're like, come on.
Like, listen, if you need to get off now, you should be ready to go. You should be the fastest person to get out of here, as opposed to, oh, let me double check. Is all my luggage here? What did I bring as a carry-on? It's like, no, man, you had 6 hours to plan this out and think about these things on the plane.
Yeah, I would be embarrassed. I'd be like, I got to get out of here.
Exactly. It's like, thank you for giving me the priority. I am getting out of here. And it's like, and I'd be saying that as I'm heading towards the nearest exit, wherever the flight attendant is pointing for me to go. It's like,
yeah, exactly.
And yeah, so what we get a funny little thing where Hank is rummaging around. He gets, paper, writes Ben Bishop's name on it. He goes up, and then Ben sees him. Is like, you must be Hank. Oh, wow. Figured you should have been a big guy. Hank's a big guy name. And I'm like, okay, this guy's being charming, and Hank is just, okay, right.
It's wasted on him.
It's wasted
Hank's
on
not
him.
Charmed.
But this is where we get our first
He is.
our first twist, is that Hank thinks he's the one that's actually delivering the medical case by himself, but we find out, no, he's actually taking Ben, who's then handling the medical case. And you had some thoughts on this, so please share with the lovely audience your thoughts on this new turn of events.
You know what, and it's funny, that's where it started, and it grew from there.
Right.
I mean, we're at page 13. We've met most of our characters, and everything's great. I shouldn't have had any problem. I enjoyed it right up to that moment, but it just popped in my head. Well, okay, I liked his, I'm the transport and not this, so get me to where I'm going. So I'm like, okay, there's something more to this. But then I'm like, I know what the story's about. It's a medical transport. Why is a guy taking this, transporting this guy when ambulances, cops, medevac,
helicopters?
I had to actually disconnect that from my thinking and went, okay, that was my first thought. And it didn't stop me from enjoying, didn't stop me from reading, but it stopped the momentum for me, because I was like, okay, if it's worth it, then it better be a good reason why this was worth it. Why this courier was hired rather than, your standard cops and get them to the hospital.
Yeah, the standard thing is like, why isn't there a medevac helicopter flying flying towards LAX to pick up Ben to help this little girl, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And since that's that sliver in my mind, if it's not worth it, it's just gonna get really irritating. And
Yeah, because that's going to grow.
yeah, it's gonna grow.
And so that's the question. And you know what? I think we can jump a little ahead, but we'll swing back again. I think the idea of the incoming storm is what the writers are trying to imply as to why there wasn't a medevac. But then it begs the question: okay, well, what about an ambulance, right?
Right.
And
then, yeah,
and then they don't have an excuse for that either. Excuse me, or a reason for it either, aside from the fact that, you know, shortly after Ben and Hank start getting on their route, we find out, okay, there's a traffic jam and there's a mudslide. But this comes well after the fact that these other issues could have been introduced and resolved.
Exactly.
So I would say, yeah, that's the first kind of red flag. It's the first big ask that, you know, the writers are asking of the audience to sort of buy into, but it comes with a series of other situations. And I think the premise would have been better if I think the premise would have been better if they set up the antagonist a bit earlier and Hank was hired as being part of security, even though that's not his position. Like, he is a runner and he's intimidating, but they hire him as part of security because he is an ex-Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
And he does courier work. And because of the rarity of the little girl's blood type and this liver, Iggy has managed to squeeze Hank in there for some extra cash as part of security with, I guess, the medical team. So it'd be Hank, 2 paramedics with an ambulance meeting up with Ben to make sure that this thing gets safe. Because then, I mean, sure, you have two paramedics, but you're kind of setting up that those 2 are going to be disposable, and now Hank has to take charge in order to succeed with this mission when things go awry. Part of me would like that might work better on the plausibility side of things, but I can also see from the writer's perspective that they don't want to bog it down with 2 extra voices that are going to be discarded pretty soon anyways. So I think they're thinking, let's just cut to the chase. But in doing so, they kind of broke verisimilitude.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, yeah.
Because I would have probably added in another step, which is like, maybe the traffic jam comes earlier and the ambulance is stuck, and then Hank is detoured from something because the ambulance said we need a third party to actually get meet up with the liver at the airport, and then get it to the ambulance because they're able to actually, like, even though they're in a traffic jam, they could probably hop the median and then swing onto the other side of the highway and return back to the hospital. So if someone can get to them on the highway as like a bridge, you know, and say the helicopters are unable to fly because the storm is already on their end and they can't safely take off in it, that gives you some things in place. So now you've got like a little mini mission, so to speak, that that the audience will kind of know is like, well, clearly he's not going to make it to the ambulance on the highway. Something's going to happen. So he has to take it all the way to its end target. But at least that's a bit more plausible, where the ambulance is on its way there. And then all of a sudden there's a big car accident, mudslide on the highway. The ambulance is stuck. The only thing it can do is turn around. And even if it turns around and takes another route, it's not going to be able to meet up with the airplane when it lands in time. So it might as well, you know, to maximize the time that you have, get this third party just to pick the guy up, take him to the ambulance, and so that they can speed back and not lose, you know, time from the detour, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in their world, they have enough time where they've rerouted from one airport to another. That's not instantaneous,
no,
but it does take up pages on the script, which has been super tight at the time. And I think, you know, just Hank saying, you know, where's medevac? Because
he's in the military. He would have known some of those procedures.
Yeah, he would have said, "Look, they can't take off." Okay, and hey, if it was just addressed, I think that would have helped us get right back on board.
Yep.
And then he's like, "Okay, ambulance, police, escort." You could say something as lean as, "Hey, you know what?" Because in reality, the protagonist of this story in real life is California traffic.
Right. Well, yeah, that's the big
That's a big
obstacle.
ask right there.
Yeah.
And but if it was just addressed as, "Hey, one guy on the move, we'll meet up with him," it kind of postpones it, but it's done in just a quick line of dialogue. You know,
Exactly, because like my one of my godsons, he's a paramedic. I asked him about this situation. He's like, he's never done it yet, but he has been trained for it, and he says ideally there would never be a third party, but if there were, it would be a licensed third party that has done medical transport before. So that would be the big ask you'd have in this situation, where Hank has never done medical stuff before, but he's a former Navy SEAL, so he's ex-military, which means he's understood some responsibility. Gives him a little bit more trustworthiness in regards to those types of jobs. And on top of that, he's got a great record as being a runner in this situation. So if Iggy's got the connections, which luckily he can, because you can make him do anything, he's kind of an oracle-like character. If he's got the connections,
yeah,
he'd be like, oh, this hospital had everything all planned out. Couple of variables that were unable to plan for or guarantee for have taken into effect. I can take advantage of this, get some money for myself and my employee, and we'll just bridge that gap there to at least help this little girl and get underway. And that's what we've got here. But, and I think this is part of the inciting incident, and I think this is also a missed opportunity, is that it is quickly implied, as Hank and Ben have got into their car and they're driving, and Ben is forced to sit in the back because Hank has his routine.
yep,
Hank notices a couple of black SUVs following him. And Iggy is calling and getting in check-ins, but Ben has already told them that, well, all the check-ins come from me, from the hospital, to my phone, so Iggy, your handler, shouldn't be talking to you at all. And so we get the idea that maybe Iggy is in on a change of plans, so to speak.
yeah. I got that. I got that impression as well, because I was like, okay, and it kind of played into my apprehension of suspension of disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of played into that, like, okay, there might be something big here that makes it all worthwhile, and if it jumps into it quick, I'll probably have forgotten, or if it makes sense in the end, it was worth it, then okay, I can let that go.
Yeah, or because I was wondering, oh, is this more like, is Hank being manipulated by Iggy to intercept this for the antagonist, and that's why it's not going through an ambulance or anything? And if so, why isn't Ben questioning a little bit about that? Or unless, was Ben given different information as well, because he's not in on it either? Like, I'm thinking, oh, are there elements in play that is deliberately trying to usurp the normal medical teams that would be a part of this transfer? And Hank is a pawn in that, and Ben has also been routed in as a pawn in that. I don't know, but I was wondering if that was going to be the case. But unfortunately, it looks like that the clues that would set up that as being the answer don't actually pay off with that as actually being the answer. It's actually not any of that.
Yeah, but your mind goes there trying to fix it.
Well, yeah, because you're trying to make sense of the logic, and you're trying to jump ahead of the story because there's something engaging about it that's causing that stimulation, which is what you want in a script and a good story. But if it doesn't pay off and ends up becoming like just a open-ended question, that dissatisfies the audience, because now you basically said, buy into this one ask, okay? Oh, now we're going to do another ask. Oh, wait a minute. Is someone has done a betrayal here? Okay. Who would be the person that's doing the betrayal? Is it Iggy? Is it Ben? Is it someone at the hospital? What we don't we don't know. And
yeah, we can feel it's there, but we're not quite sure what we're holding on to or wondering about.
Yeah, it's like trying to eat Jello with your fingers and it keeps on squishing through, as opposed to just grabbing a spoon and feeding it that way. So it was kind of weird. And it was always something that kind of was in the back of my mind, and I know it was in the back of your mind as well as the scenes were progressing, because the scenes themselves move quickly.
They do. They're kind of chaotic in nature, and I don't mind that. It does. I think if it's not done well visually, you know, maybe one's high pace so you get a second to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, when you're looking at it here on paper, you're just going, you're not getting that visual stimulation or that visual idea to where you're being pulled along. You're seeing well, I didn't need this break, but if this show was done right, I would be appreciative of this moment
Right.
where the pace slowed down. But then also, is it abused because too much stuff happens off screen while we're focusing on something we didn't need to?
Yeah, and in this case here, when we leave Hank and Ben to see some of the other characters, they're very pivotal scenes that do good definition, but they don't answer the looming question of how did we really get to this place?
Right.
And,
so is it distraction and not? Does it go against it, or?
well, the thing is, it's not a distraction. It's really just an avoidance, because I'd argue the scenes are useful, right? Like,
Yeah,
we learn a bit
yeah.
about Damien, who's the antagonist. We learn about his mother, who's the head of the organization. She needs the liver as well, so that's your conflict there. We understand between Ben and Hank. Ben's a chatty guy. He picks up Hank's not, so he's like, let's reconcile this. I'll only be 50% chatty. You be 50% more chatty.
I like that.
Which I thought was funny. But we also have
Yeah.
a ticking clock, right? So Hank's like, we have to get to the hospital by 9 p.m. because the liver's only viable until 9:45. So, 10 is really like the be-all and end-all. They never mention 10, but they basically, if he gets, the closer he is to 10 o'clock at night, the worse his situation is going to be for the little girl. So
Yeah.
I would say the ticking clock is kind of a distraction, but it's not a distraction with regards to what we wish was answered. It's actually a very useful tool and a logical tool with regards to the premise of transporting an organ from point A to point B. So you're like, there's all these things that are being done right around one kind of glaring mistake of how did we get here?
Yeah. Yep. But it wasn't enough to derail me and run away with the story, but I jumped back to it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it does get us into like certain set pieces for starters. I mean, the SUVs eventually, catch up to and surround Hank and Ben, and they get into a scuffle. They manage to get away. They're on foot. They're hopping over fences. They find their way to Hank's ex-wife's house, and we learn that Hank and his ex-wife, they had a little girl who got a disease and she passed away, but Hank wasn't really there for her because the sicker his daughter got, the more drunk he got to try and fight the pain. And that's what caused him and his wife to break up at the end. And that's why he's in recovery. That's why he's sober. That's why and the reason why he's learning French is because his daughter, before she passed away, was a huge Francophile. She loved everything France and French, and he's doing it. And when I read this part of the script where he's conveying this to Ben, I'm like, oh, that's the Equalizer moment. Because if you remember the Equalizer, he's reading books that his wife wanted to read. So that's how he's keeping her alive in his mind, and this is how Hank is keeping his daughter alive in his mind.
And that particular scene where he encountered his ex-wife and that was escaped into her area.
Yeah.
My mood the first time reading it was a little bit like, okay, I was irritated and I'm just going to push through this. But I liked the interaction and I liked what we got from it. But then I started going back to an 80s action film. And in the 80s, the ex-husband he's going to get it in a big way. Maybe he's going to die. He's going to be in on the conspiracy. They were really abused, the new husbands. And so quite often that's how the main character and his ex-wife got back together.
Right.
But and so in my mind, I'm still like applying this to this script unfairly, obviously because it's not doing it. But that was my comparison. And then when we got the interaction, I felt, oh, okay, I was right back on track. But then I had another. Then it jumped. Right after that moment, it went. What are you going to do now? And he turned into, I'm going to get a medevac.
Yeah. And it's
And
like,
that
where was this
that was
20
it.
pages ago?
I got slapped. I'm like, ugh. Yeah, where was this? And
Yeah.
I was almost wondering if somebody said that's their biggest critique reading this, going, all right, medevac and ambulance. So that this was they're trying to address it.
And it
And
came way too late in the game.
way too late. Yep.
Yeah. Because,
But at least
yeah, go ahead. Keep going. Go.
I was going to say, but at least they tried.
I mean, yeah, you got to give him, like, say, a D for effort.
Yeah.
Because that's what it was, a D level effort. But, I mean, leading up to that point, very cool little bits here. Like, when Hank finds out Iggy has actually been taken hostage by Damien and his guys. And that's why he's trying to get Hank to just hand over the case. And then Ben's not telling Hank, who the transplant is for until we find out that they are surrounded. They're boxed in. There's a gun. There's guns trained on their car. And Hank's got to make the decision. Does he save Iggy, who's being threatened over the phone by Damien, or does he gun the engine and try and save this little girl? And, of course, you and I were both on the same page with this, saying there's no way he's not going to save that girl. But the writers are trying to put in a little bit of suspense here, as if Hank had a difficult choice to make. And I'm like, yeah, this is, it shouldn't have been that way. It should, I mean, I understand the whole countdown part that Damien's doing. And part of me is thinking, because there's a couple of ideas I was thinking about as I was reading this. One of them being is like, as soon as Ben says, it's a little girl, her life is on the line, she's going to die, the instant, it doesn't matter what the count is at, it should be still like within 3 or what have you. Hank would be like, I'm sorry, Iggy, you know why. And then boom, hangs up and then goes. And
Yeah.
because that makes sense, and that shows you priorities for this character. And then we finally see Iggy being thrown out the back of the SUV after being shot in the head, and that causes a whole kerfuffle on the road. But now it's just Hank and Ben on their own gunning it, and that's when they end up meeting up with Hank's ex-wife. They get her car they borrow. There's a neat little bit of a scene. This goes into my second part where I'm like, they broke a rule, which is never make anything easy for your characters, whether it's your main villain or main hero. So Hank figures out that they're tracking his phone. So he tosses it into the back of a truck that's just driving by. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Good distraction. The guys are going to follow the phone in the back of the truck. They do. They catch up to the truck, and the truck driver is capitulating so effortlessly to these guys that have not yet drawn a gun on him yet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, it doesn't matter that it's the state of California. It's a guy in a pickup truck with tools and gear and whatnot. He's going to be protective of that. He's going to be, a little bit more masculine. He might even have a shotgun, in the back of the cab. Why not have, when these SUVs, kind of cut him off, he basically like kick open his front door with the shotgun and ready to blow some heads off, and maybe shoot at Damien and his goons for compromising himself and possibly his business, because that shows you that not everything is going to go as planned, because so far everything has not gone as planned, and it shouldn't just be as a result of Damien's actions. It should be because the environment of this movie is what's messing around with these main characters as much as the conflicting goals of Damien and Hank, right?
Right. Yeah. You know what? And I didn't think of it that way but that's a good point. If he had been more aggressive, it would have been made harder on Damien. Damien, they did a good job of making him just like stereotypical bad. He's
80s bad all the way.
Yeah, he slicks back. He's doing coke while he's driving. I mean, all the stereotypes, right?
Yeah.
He's a psychopath. He's,
but he loves his mother.
His mom.
But he loves his mother.
But he loves his mother.
Yeah.
And you know what? So they didn't need. I mean, Damien was a favorite character of mine, and if you get a really good actor for that, someone who would enjoy, a nice person who just enjoy being a good bad guy and just really lean into it, that'd totally make the movie, in my opinion. because
Yeah, it's a chew scenery role. It's chewing the scenery type of role. Yeah.
yep, you got to get somebody that would just everybody wants to see be bad and will forgive them for being bad.
Yeah.
And I
like a
think
younger Kevin Bacon.
yeah, yeah, yep. And yeah, and they didn't need to make him more, aggressive to the driver and make him so weak, and he was just a distraction. But yeah, they could have made it a little bit harder for him. So you get a little. I mean, we have enough. Oh yeah, we know he's bad. We know he's evil. Get a little bit of, oh, he has it hard. So maybe we're not really sympathizing for him, but we're like, we're going, oh yeah, okay, you get a little bit of what you deserve. Maybe get rid of a couple of his
a taste of karma. Yeah.
yeah, his henchmen, to where he's got all the people he needs to take down this guy. Although he was quite upset, that it was a Navy SEAL, and and his mom was too. So you didn't need more to make to build Damien. You almost needed something to help even the odds for Hank that worked in his favor, but also made it tougher for Damien to accomplish what he wants to do.
Well, it's also like giving us the unexpected with a little bit of plausibility, because again, I mean, how construction guys who work in construction, or at least transporting goods in construction, they do have a little bit of an edge and a type to them. They're not the person that's like, oh, there's a guy in a suit who's yelling at me. Okay, I will capitulate. No, I've seen tons of dash cam footage where even people who don't have good clothes, who make a shout out at another guy, especially in a truck, gets a fistful of middle fingers and verbal abuse thrown back at them at the bare minimum before one of them steps out of the car, if not with a shotgun, a baseball bat or a fire axe or something. They're ready to throw down. I'm like, yeah, let's explore that, man. Let's see how does the villain respond to that type of aggression. And either Damien, loses a guy and maybe gets slightly injured, or this is the point where we can show how dangerous he is and that he takes that guy out like it's nothing. And you're like, oh crap, even with Hank being the big guy that he is, we just saw Damien take out someone that's kind of almost a contemporary to Hank. That means that if they face off, mano a mano, it's not going to be an easy win, right? So, seize advantage of the opportunity that you've done for yourself with this distraction. You played it in good to get them away, give your heroes a buffer and distance from the antagonists, but use it to actually really show how threatening this guy could be, or that karma is actually going to be going, that the entire environment is going to be against everybody in this script.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that stuck out to me. That was like, ooh, that was a missed opportunity there. I mean, granted, if the writers are listening to this show, they have the luxury of going back and fixing that and sending it out for possible production. But we get that cool aspect of it, right? Is that okay? We've got our heroes. They're in another car. They're heading towards the hospital. Things are a lot better than what they were beforehand. And then all of a sudden they do their check-in, say where they're going to be, and then you get the taken speech from Hank, who basically says, listen to me, lady, you don't need to do anything because we're going to get you this organ by the time that we agreed upon, and not a second later, because what I'm going to do is get us a police escort in about 5 minutes. This is where, we're doing the medevac and everything. And he basically says, I do not fail at these types of jobs. And you're like, that's your trailer. Like that's your trailer, and that's basically, that told me like right off the bat, oh, these writers are setting this up as a franchise where we're gonna get, if this one hits, we're gonna get other runner movies where he's gonna be doing something, saving some person in some capacity, and this is what they're trying to set up. I'm like, okay, cool, props for that. They're actually thinking ahead, but they're not doing so at the expense of what this story is, despite the two significant issues so far that have popped up, by the first 50 pages.
Yeah. No, I thought that as well. That this could easily be a series, but it follows. I mean, the problems I had with it are self-contained, have nothing to do with the fact that it actually does put everything in place to finish the story.
Exactly.
They didn't
And
leave anything out.
right. And but then it does another hiccup, and this has to do with what we were talking before the show. So Jake, share with us the 911 issue you had.
And yeah, when he said he promised he would get a police escort, was one time he called 911, and they basically shrugged him off, and he went through a big dialogue. It was in that moment he was trying to get an ambulance, and they basically told him no. Now that in that moment, I felt like that was them trying to fix
Fix the earlier
an
plot
issue
hole.
that
Yeah.
they had avoided. But the next time he called 911, he says, "Where's a hospital?" Because this is after, they had an injury. They needed to go to the hospital. You don't know if he's going to get an ambulance, medevac, or help their injury.
He just says, "This is where I am. Where's the nearest hospital?"
Where's the nearest hospital?
It's like,
and they tell him, and he hangs up.
it's like, well, Google Maps will do that for you right off the bat.
Yeah.
To his first call, when you're saying further, it's like he's trying to get the police escort. The biggest thing here that didn't make sense is he introduced himself as Hank Malone and how he's a former, a Navy SEAL, and it's like the dispatcher has no reason to believe him, and you've done nothing to confirm to make us believe him from the operator's perspectives, right? Because again, the way he's talking, the stuff he's saying is like the operator is justifiably and appropriately viewing this as a potential prank call, right?
Yeah, and you definitely got that.
And the thing is, unfortunately, there's nothing that Hank says that betters his case to convince the operator. And I think that's a big missed opportunity, because it really should be more along the lines of, have you heard reports of this accident that happened at this highway at this time? Yes. Well, I was a part of that because this is what's happening here, and I've got the license plate of the black SUVs involved. I am in the middle of transporting this liver. Ben Bishop is the courier. He is with X company. This is the number of X company. You can call them to verify my information. I need police to help us get out here. All those, a proper, a former Navy SEAL, someone who has been part of a military rank, who understands procedure, who understands caution, who understands skepticism, should be able to convey this information in an emergency when, the crap hits the fan. It's like, okay, we can no longer be on our own. We need outside help that we can trust. Best case scenario is the police. And we know, like, he should be well aware that, I'm going to call him and say I'm a former Marine and you have to take me seriously. It's like, no, I'm sorry, buddy. Like, listen, lots of people will make that claim to try and prove them legit. It means nothing. Give them something that they can follow up with on their own time to verify, and then that's how you get your support. And that's what Hank should have done here, because now this scene ends up becoming a fleeting scene where it's just, all right, we're doing this to try and plug in the plot holes we accidentally set up at this point, and just to keep them still in there. But the tragic part is that the setup for the scene is terrible, but the payoff with regards to why they can't get help, completely justified. Like, there's a mudslide, all these things, there's crap going on. All the police officers in this area have been dispatched to this location. Of course, the operator wouldn't say all. They would say the majority of our resources are here. Other resources are making sure nobody takes advantage of that, sparing something for an escort of this case that, is going to be very difficult, given especially your position and how the fact that the highway is blocked up. There's no way we could get a unit out to you until traffic clears. So you are stuck on your own. However, stay on the line. Maybe we can coordinate something. Maybe we can try and see if there's a pilot available to come meet you somewhere, and weather the storm and all that. Like, just give us some variables that we could play into for the plausibility aspect, also to up the stakes. Because I guess what? You get a police helicopter in there that's going to go and pick up these guys, but you get Damien to intercept that, and we get a helicopter being blown up. That's a good set piece right there. Like,
oh, it is. It is. Yeah, and also while he was talking, there was enough dialogue to do and say all those things that you just said. So it wouldn't have added to the page count. And plus, we already had examples where Hank, you know, talking through someone telling them to calm down showed that he was graceful under pressure.
Right.
And that would have just, if we were going to have some unrealistic or antagonistic behavior that just is hard, that I have to accept is okay, even though it wouldn't really happen in real life, is I would rather have the police say, well, thanks to you and all that, your accidents that you've caused, plus the mudslide, plus the weather, plus all this conflict we already had, and then we can't come and help you now. So I would accept that, and I think we as the audience would accept that, and our frustration would be in sympathizing with Hank and Ben. That
Yeah, because I mean,
trying Nikki getting told no, and they got to keep going. They're the only ones.
Because they're given two options, which is either keep going on your route or get to the nearest police station and maybe we can do something there. Well, and it's like, well, that detour will eat up the very valuable time that's already ticking away right now. So it's like, okay,
yeah, and he was never going to take that option.
Exactly, but I mean that was one of the things that was presented, and again, it's basically the tail end of this sequence better than the setup, because the setup doesn't do what it's supposed to do, which is fix the plot holes, which shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Yeah. Yep. And if they had addressed that they were short police force, they did make it sound, they did address that. They said, all these units were covering the mudslide.
Right.
Well, that's a big city. A lot of counties, a lot of police departments. I don't see them all at one mudslide.
A couple of different sheriff departments as well.
Yeah. So, a couple more things that would have they could have used this big plot hole to actually build more suspense and rooting for, that Hank is on his own.
Like proper coverage of the other resources that should be available but can't be, because really the series of events have actually just caused the timing to be off. Because it's like, if let's say there was going to be a police escort, but the traffic jam that's been set up is what's preventing it, which gets us to the point where it's like it's just Hank and Ben on their own. And then you're like, okay, well, now that we know that the traffic jam is doing this, the storm is actually causing further traffic and now mudslides, which means that any additional escort that could have been available has been diverted to help people in that emergency situation. So that's where you escalate the stakes of like nature versus man in this case. And then on top of that, you're like, the storm is getting so bad, you can't even get a medevac out there. And there's not many helicopter pilots, especially, with the police department, with the hospital, that are experienced enough to safely navigate a storm with the helicopter. So for the bureaucratic side of things, we're grounding them at this point. And Hank's like, crap, I'm the only guy that actually has experience to fly in this weather. And that's a setup that they do a little bit later, but it doesn't pay off because they decide to throw in another hook, an interesting hook, a plausible one, which is that how does Damien keep finding these two, right?
Yeah, and he had addressed it with the phone, but he didn't know there was obviously something else. And I was wondering if that was supposed to imply that, because I mean they did have a little bit of an opening, like, is Iggy, up until Iggy was disposed of, is Iggy the plant? Right. You didn't know that there was something, but they did address it. They said, does that weasel know that he planted spyware?
Yeah.
So we know, and I like how he's finding it out, but so, maybe Ben's going to turn out to be a heel and he's, doing it all for the money. He's the one. I think they could have leaned into a little bit more like that, where there's some suspicious behavior about Ben.
Yeah.
But he was altruistic through the whole thing. But if there was a couple of things where we started to doubt it, maybe not us as the audience, but Hank was doubting it, to where they have that moment where, do we keep working together? Am I just helping you hurt someone else?
Yeah, are you directing me to the right location? Am I going to get to this hospital and it's not going to be a little girl there, but it's going to be this crime boss lady?
Yeah.
Like that type of mystery, that if it is or isn't, I think that could have been played up a little bit more, because because I mean, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening so far. We are getting to the threshold point where we can't talk about what happens next to the script after this one little moment, because it is one heck of an interesting set piece and ending and resolution. But what ends up happening here is that we got this point where Hank is trying to figure out how they have done everything they should have that would have normally got them away from Damien and smooth sailing, aside from the normal, elemental aspects of the weather, but they were still being found. So Hank takes a guess and says it can't be Ben, so he's going to call Kate and say, and he's going to give her instructions, because they pull into this gas station, and across the street is another gas station, and Ben is slightly injured, and so he basically says, Kate, I want you to find out, talk to the people that you talk with all the time when you're there at the hospital with your daughter, and tell them this, that we're at this location, and he gives them the address to the gas station across the street, and he gives them a fake make and model of a car, and he's like, and then the moment you finish saying that, pay attention to see who makes a phone call right away afterwards, and that's where we're going to end it off, because that leads into a very interesting reveal. Yeah. So with that being said, before we get into the actual rating and stuff, is there any other aspects you want to address, Drake, before we move along?
Yes, no, let me see.
Yeah, go through your notes.
One of the things they kind of added that there was value based on her blood type and this liver, and that maybe I'm being too nitpicky, but I was also that was another thing that pulled me out of it, was they were trying to really ham up how rare and how this is such an opportunity. Financial, there's this value, and I was thinking to myself that there's only a hand. They said what? There are 5 other people in the country.
5 other people in the state, I think.
Oh, in the state. Okay,
yeah.
But even then, well, one of them would have to have a lot of money, and one of them would have to be criminally
connected,
or going, for it to have the value. And I don't think it needed to be rare. It could have just been very easily, this Kate, she's got her grandfather's pulling some strings.
Right.
Another wizard out off into the world off screen that's pulling strings that maybe even leans a little, because I honestly, I didn't think they needed to add the whole rare blood type. It's going to this girl, and other people want it. You keep the rare blood type, but it doesn't, just because it's rare doesn't mean it's valuable unless you add the criminal element to it. So it kind of felt contrived.
It felt like their increase in the rarity was to try and up the stakes. But at the same time, it's like, I also felt the value they associated with it was like $1 million. I'm like, that's valuable for you and me, but on a black market site for something that rare, that seems kind of little. I'm thinking more like $100 million for, if this is how rare it's supposed to be.
And then again, you have to have the person who needs it has to have the $100 million for it to be worth it. Where it'd almost be better, especially if you're going to stay at $1 million, is, quite a few people could get this, and there's quite a few people that want this. So the more people who want it, the more chances we have a buyer, and the value's there. And then you don't know whether Donna and Damien are getting it for themselves or to sell. Because your synopsis actually said to save their organization.
Yeah.
And I like that, because it didn't tell you whether it was for someone or they were just doing it for financial motivations. And they teased it the whole time about money and that, and he's like, it doesn't matter. They never really offered. Oh, they did offer him money. And he's like, no, I'm going to get this to the little girl. It was never really in doubt that he would.
Mm-hmm.
But if they were playing around with the financial aspect of it, they should have had it. It was there already. So they should have used something that.
They should have played with it to actually be something tempting, because.
Yeah, it only pointed in one direction.
Because they also kind of backtrack. They also kind of backtrack a little bit of, the state of urgency on Damien's side of things, where his mother needs the liver as well to survive, but you find out, well, she's actually facing trial, so she wants to live to serve her time in prison, which apparently might be a lock. I'm like, that's kind of weird. If they said that, if it was basically to the point where it's like she's not facing that, and she needs to be at her peak health in order to stay ahead of the investigation that's surrounding her criminal enterprises, that's higher stakes, right? There's more desperation on Damien's side there because of it. It's like, I'm saving my mom because if in her weakened condition she's vulnerable to the government and the DA's office from cracking down on her in the business, and if she dies before she's able to get all her ducks in a row, where does that leave me? Damien, where does that leave him? And because that business is all he knows, right? So would he go to jail too? So when you don't present those stakes to your antagonist and you just kind of backtrack them, it goes down to the point where it's like, well, why even have her sick in the first place if she's already facing criminal charges? She's been allowed to convalesce at home while this trial is in the early stages, so she's not locked up, she's not in prison. She's got this comfort around her. It's like, well, she really just wants the liver so that she can face trial, and then that liver's going to go to waste in a prison anyways, where this young little girl could live a full life. Yeah. So you kind of stepped on your own gimmick there. Yeah.
and what they did right was they set up her ruthlessness. Kill everyone who made this difficult. She shoots the henchman that didn't portray the runner didn't give the information that the runner was an ex-Navy SEAL.
Right.
I like that ruthlessness of it. I made me think of like a Angelica Houston.
Yeah.
As a maternal type, but also there's a hint of evil, and she can pull that off so well.
Yeah. Same thing with like Allison Janney could have done that too.
Oh yeah. She could. And they could have fun. I gotta say I think they did so well with the characters that if it was cast well and made well and visually, it would pull you through all these little avoidances and plot holes.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Could have done that. So with that being said, Jake, if the chips are down, what's your take on this script? Would you pass this, or would you greenlight it, given the things it did right versus the things it did wrong?
I would pass based on what it did wrong, with the caveat that I want to see this movie. I would see this. If I saw that trailer you described, I would see this movie.
Right.
While reading this, I didn't, maybe I didn't do a good enough job expressing it, but these characters these writers, I think they enjoyed writing this. I got that sense reading this. They enjoyed making their bad guy bad. They enjoyed making their tough guy tough. They enjoyed making their action scenes bombastic. There was a lot of just I felt that, and so I want to see it. I want to see more, but not in this state would I give it I'd pass.
You'd pass, yeah.
Yeah.
Reluctant. Yeah, it's a reluctant pass. Okay. I'm almost undecided at this point, because I'm like, the premise is good, but they screw up the setup of what that inciting incident is. The set pieces are well written. The characters are well written. the payoff, I thought the ending was all right, but I can't disregard the valid parts with regards to the 911 calling. That scene didn't hold up well. Calling 911 again for nearest hospital when you already have the smartphone with that capability as well. So that seems weird. Like, you have not established that Hank is anti-tech because he's using the very tech to learn French. So you've got that there. So it's like, man. But at the same time, it's like, well, I could greenlight this, and most likely those problems would be fixed. And there's enough there to get that done. But you know, I'm like, it's really like a nail biter for me, because I mean, it's not as bad as some of the other stuff that we've passed on this show.
Can I ask you a question?
Go right ahead.
So if you were greenlighting it to pass on to a studio and your reputation was on the line, would you pass it? Or if you were taking it and the studio was saying, help me make it, and you were allowed in its fixing, would you make the same decision?
It's a good question.
Would you pass? Or
the thing is, if I had the creative input in there, I would know I can make this great, so I would greenlight it. If I didn't have the choice to make the notes, I'd definitely be in the same boat as you. I'd probably pass it, but it's a reluctant pass.
Okay.
And the other part too is, like, again, as I mentioned before, more on the show, whenever a script is purchased, it's going to get notes, and it's not going to be in the same condition when it ends. So it really just comes down to who's the right people. But you know, I think this might have to be a split one here. I think you're absolutely right in saying that it's a pass because the criticisms are very valid, or a reluctant pass because the criticisms are very valid. I might have a reluctant green light only for the fact that, aside from those plot elements, like those 3 plot elements, why is the medical staff not part of the actual courier operations, why the way Hank is addressing the police, and also the arguments he's made to try and get their assistant are very thin and not working out. Those are kind of crucial parts that maintain the stability of the rest of the film, because it's not exactly like we were talking about before the show. It's not exactly a script that's built on sand. It's kind of built on mud, and it's not a loose mud. It's not a very solid mud, but it's right in the middle where, you know, the slightest nudge could cause that structure to slide away, but if nothing touches it, it would still be fine. You know? And so I think this might be a split just in that premise, because like I'm kind of weighing it down. Do I like the characters? Yeah. You like the characters. It's just a couple of plot elements that feel off on the structure. And it's like, but I'm just wondering, yeah, they could be easily fixed, but are they egregious enough to warrant a pass? And for me, I'm thinking I don't think so. I think it just barely squeaks by because the characters are strong enough to let it go. But even if you were to put it in production, I would watch this in the movie and it still makes the same flaws, I'd be bothered as I am today right now on that.
The ends justify the means on this one.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like, oh, darn. But yeah.
I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
If I saw another script come by with either of these guys' names on it, I'd read it. You know, if I was in that situation.
Right. Okay, that's a good point
too.
I would
too. The same script come again, I'd read it and I'd be excited. You know.
Right.
So I mean, yeah. That I enjoyed it, but I had problems.
And you know what? That's you know, you articulated the problems well, and I agree with them. It does have the problems. For me, I think okay, the screenwriter part of me gets really annoyed by this, but the person that's looking at this as a potential movie is like, oh, but we can kind of move past it. Because again, I'm also rating it against what we've already read, and what I've also voted against on that. We're just, more work would be required to correct the previous stuff that we've voted no on, than in this one here, where oh, we just need to justify why the hospital can't participate in this last leg of the transport. And you come up with a very solid reason for that. Everything else lines up without any issue.
Yeah.
And that boils it down to like one flaw. And that's tough because it's like it's a significant flaw. It's actually it's one that should not be in the script, and yet it is. Yeah.
It's one flaw, but a majority of the audience could get that little mind sliver in their head and never let it go.
Right.
It's not massive. The script and the action and the chaos and everything could push past it, but yeah, it's there. Until it's gone. But if you gave it a green light and was involved, you'd get rid of it right away.
Oh yeah, I'd fix it, and I almost fixed it on this show.
So it's absolutely fair. I'm kind of glad we're split on it, even though I don't want to. I like to agree, but I actually at this point I'm like, no, I'm kind of glad we split because
yeah, me too. I'm fine.
It's fair
because and it's a valid thing because it's like because I completely understand where you're coming from and I agree with it. It's like yeah, this is a big issue. But I think the only reason I'm apprehensive to throw in with you, even though I agree, is the fact that the characters are kind of so well done that it's like I'm not forgiving the mistake, but it's like if the characters were bad as well, it'd be a lot easier for me to say yes, 100%. But it feels more like they put their characters before the story, but they missed an element of the story that would live up to those characters.
Yeah.
And it's just that one element that kind of branches off into two other smaller things. But it's so easily identifiable that if you fix that, the other smaller things are solved.
Yeah. What it did well, it did really well. Better than average.
Oh, exactly. And that's why I knew I would get a really great conversation out of this script because it fits into genres you said you liked. But it also has that one little thing that's like, oh, if you didn't screw up right here, this would have been, the movie you'd tell all your friends about.
Yeah, and you'd be looking forward to the sequel.
Right. And you know what? The other part, too, that I got to give the writers props for is that they were able to set up that this could be a franchise, but they didn't do it at the expense of trying to tell a good story.
Yeah. Finish reading the story. It does finish. We don't want to leave it. And that's why a good part of it's spoiler.
Yeah.
And it's not a singular spoiler like if you knew one part of it, you'd ruin the movie. But that's how well it does everything else that, you have to cut it somewhere. And that's a good spot.
Yeah.
Because if not, you're missing more than you're getting.
100%. And yeah, so I think I'm gonna stick with the reluctant green light, and actually like give you props on your reluctant pass, because I think the reasons are valid. Like the reasons are 100% valid. It's like that's because I can see that bugging a lot of people. It bugs me to a point.
But to a person who can fix it.
Yeah, but to a person who can fix it, you can fix it.
You should see it that way.
Yeah.
To a person who just paid for it, I'm on the back end. You're on the front end.
Yeah, but we're only really an inch apart. Like that's the thing. Like we're only an inch apart on it.
You're 51-49.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is that I'm also looking at this way compared to the other scripts past. There's a lot less to fix on this one than on the previous ones. So I'm just weighing the effort as well. But I will say, like it's not a perfect script. It has that big flaw, but I do strongly encourage everyone to read it. Google it. It's called Runner. If you can't find it, reach out to me on social media or through the Patreon. I can hook you up with the script. Just don't spread it or try to make it go viral or what have you. And share your thoughts, because this is kind of like my favorite episode so far that we've done, because we disagree on the outcome of where this rates, but we both agree with our critique on it.
Yeah. I'd love to hear somebody's other thoughts on it, just because.
Yes.
Would they see the same thing, or would they go, "Oh man, you're so off on that. This is why it's great," or "Oh no, this is why it's worse."
Yeah, like point out what did we miss, like on either side, please, because that might help us with if we decide to revisit this. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's it. Are there any final thoughts, I guess, before we call it a night, Jake?
Yeah. You guys, if you ever listen to this show, White and Hubley, man, keep writing. I mean,
100%. Yeah.
That doesn't mean much coming from me, but I want to see something you write. I liked your characters.
Yep, and I'm also happy that even though the premise was similar to a Mike Barron story, you made it your own. And, if you could just fix that one plausible aspect of justifying why an ambulance or a medical helicopter is unable to meet at the airport, and how Hank got involved, just a little bit more solid foundation there, I think this could be a nice, B-level franchise. Because the character of Hank is interesting, and the job he has opens up at least a handful of story opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah, and it started out as Alan Richardson, and by the middle of the script, I could see Jason Statham.
Yeah.
But again, that's just me, But it was more when his dialogue in the middle. But that's just kind of how my mind works.
What's funny, though, is that Jason Statham could probably play Ben better. Because I've seen him do roles where he's not the serious action star guy. And he could probably do Ben a lot better. And I could see Ben. I see Jason Statham as Ben and Alan Richardson as Hank. And I'm like, that's an interesting dynamic.
Oh, you make that show, yeah.
Yeah.
And there was a little bit of an edge to Ben. They hinted at it.
Yep.
I don't remember how much of it we saw. We did see him, in other parts of the script we're not discussing. We see some things that he
does. Yeah.
Yeah. No, actually, that would be good. Now, if you get the really, the key is Damien's character.
Right.
You get somebody we want to see be bad. I'll happily eat my words.
Well, I mean, your words are delicious already, because you're not wrong in your assessment. That's the thing. It's like it's a very valid point, and I agree with that point. I do. There's just no difference. It's not enough for me for saying a pass yet. I mean, again, it would come down to if the characters were not as solid as they were. That would tip the scales 100% into the pass part.
Yeah.
But I think the characters are strong enough just to get me that 1 inch over onto the other side, away from your point. And it's like, yeah, I can again, and this is actually a common thing that happens in Hollywood, is sometimes, and audiences have this as well. Sometimes the plot sucks, but you love those characters. Like, you want to see them again. You enjoyed yourself with them. They had funny lines, or they had passionate lines, or they had badass lines, and good set pieces. And you're like, you know what? Dang, that plot sucked, but man, I'd love to see that guy come back and play that character again in another story.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. I can see where it gets tough for people who make movies.
Yes. Like,
a million things have to go right.
Yep. A million things have to go right, and only one thing has to go wrong. Yep. And this one I can kind of understand how it's in the top 25, but it has a low vote count, and I understand that very much so. So that
if only they had Damien blowing up the medevac helicopter as it was going to land.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
Rocket launcher right off the freeway.
Yeah.
Started off hot.
No. Who knows what sort of gear he's got in those SUVs, right?
Yep. No, No, it was good though. I really enjoyed reading it. I really enjoyed discussing it too.
Yep.
I want to change my mind, but I also want to stick to it.
Stick to it, man. I'm gonna back you 100% on that.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty. I'm all for it, because that's one of the things you kind of hope to find in the show. You want that discourse. You want that conversation. It's like, okay, yeah, Jake would have passed on this, and I agree with him on that, because he's not wrong, and I would greenlight it just because the characters are so strong that it makes being able to fix that error a lot easier of a problem to solve than had those characters been bad.
Yeah. And worth it too. Yeah.
Yep.
Worth taking the risk. Yep.
Exactly. So with that, Jake, man, thank you so much for coming tonight. I can't wait to have you back again. Probably be in a couple of weeks, because I like to rotate out as many as I can. But you will be returning, because it doesn't matter that you disagree with me. What matters is that you made a great point.
Well, that's good. That it happened. A broken clock is right twice a day. And that's my one. I got one more coming.
Oh no, it's who knows how many more are out there, and that's actually the best part, because I like those differences of opinion. It just livens things up, and the other part too is, like, I'm not looking for affirmation. I'm looking to say, you know what, this is my thing, and you know, anyone that disagrees with you, Jake, I'm going to defend you on that, because I think you're absolutely right. For what you valued with this script, and I'm excited because, you know, we finally got a split vote after 34 episodes, which is not bad. That's good. That shows that, oh, look, we got a writing team out here that, you know, they're not 100% on either side, but there's something there.
There definitely is, yeah.
And that's better than being, you know, only on the negative side. Not as great as always being on the positive side, but it's still something there and something extra. So, man, I'm hoping for more of those, because there's more stuff to discuss. Yeah. So, with that, that's it, guys. Thank you so much for listening to the show, whether live or on the replay. It's greatly appreciated. As always, please be sure to do all the likes and supports and promotions. Again, if you're listening to this show for the first time, and you want to participate in the conversation by commenting on the YouTube channel, or you can sign up for free for 1 week free trial on the Patreon. You'll see what script we're reading on the Mondays. You can read it. You can post in the comments section there. We will read it on the show in this portion where I'm speaking now, and add on to that and get your voice in. Really, we want some more interaction from you guys, because we love hearing from you, and we love being able to share with you the earliest stages of screenwriting in the Hollywood industry, to show you that there are original ideas out there, and even though some of the studios are trying to suppress them, we're not going to suppress them over here. We're going to let you see them, and maybe get lucky with a great one that audiences will convey to the powers that be, to maybe get something made and entertain all of you, as it has all of us. With that, Jake, do you want anyone to follow you on the socials or any of that nature stuff? Please go ahead and pitch it. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I don't really do anything on YouTube, but I am on social media. You want to follow, you can. Follow Scripts on Saturdays, and follow Script Doctor, and all these other hosts. That's actually helped me. I've been able to see a few other people I may not have noticed.
Yeah, and
it's enjoyable.
It is, and that's why I liked the fact that all you guys, when I put out the call, you guys answered, and it's been a blast. It's really livened up the show and given it some different flavors every week, and I can't wait to keep pushing through with that with more. So, ladies and gentlemen, with that, thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful weekend, and until next week, never forget, when it comes to great story, it all starts with the script.